Hey, everybody, this is Sean Kelley McKeever. I'm the writer of Spider-Man comics you've probably never read, like Spider-Man Family, Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane, Marvel Adventures Spider-Man, and Spider-Girl, and you are listening to Amazing Spider Talk.
Two men who know the angles, uncover and untangle all the questions and the webs left out to tangle. Be it 1962, last Wednesday's afternoon, they'll bend your ears with reckless self-abandon. The Amazing Spider Talk. The Amazing Spider Talk. Come swing through the air, sit back and prepare for the Amazing Spider Talk.
Hello and welcome to the Amazing Spider Talk. My name is Dan Gvozden and I'm the editor at SuperiorSpiderTalk.com.
And I'm Mark Ginocchio, editor and founder of the Chasing Amazing blog and an editor at SuperiorSpiderTalk.com.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us for this special episode of Amazing Spider Talk. It's an Amazing Spider Talk and Friends episode. We hope you enjoy this podcast and that it provides an intelligent conversation between two fans and collectors and a creator as we look at the Spider-Man comic universe in a bit of a bigger picture.
Yes, Dan, and for this episode, we will be welcoming on Spider-Man writer Sean Kelley McKeever, who scripted such books as the young adult Mary Jane series, Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane, Marvel Adventures Spider-Man. He even did a fill-in issue for Spider-Girl, replacing the legendary Tom DeFalco for an issue. Lots of young adult stuff, but it's also worth noting, and we talk about this in the interview, that the Spider-Man Homecoming movie that's coming out this summer, the director John Watts has kind of referenced Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane as a source of influence. So we'll get a sense from Sean about his process and how he gears comics towards younger audiences, and maybe from that we can get a sense and predict a little bit about what might show up on the big screen in July.
I'm really excited about it because, as we've said previously on the show, it's kind of a recent discovery for you and I, having just kind of filling in our Spider-Man gaps, and we both kind of loved this story. So it's a kind of a nice thing to discover as you dig through the Spider-Man archives. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I got to be honest, and I even admitted this in the interview, that I really this was not on my radar because I was like, young adult Spider-Man. What am I going to find out of that and enjoy out of that? Not that all Spider-Man isn't technically geared towards younger audiences. Certainly early Spider-Man, and you could even say the current Spider-Man. There's a maturity that might be better for younger audiences. Crazy town, banana pants.
Right. Well, Dan Slott in an interview just the other day said that he's 25 to 35 years old with the mind of a 15-year-old. So there you go.
There you go. Well, anyway, but I did check out the series after reading the John Watts interview that referenced it, and I was blown away by it. I was like, wow, this is right up our alley, Dan. These are very character-centric stories. They're very entertaining. They're very quick moving. I mean, the arcs. There's one long arc that kind of goes throughout, but the stories themselves kind of get wrapped up in an issue or two. It's like, yeah, this is what comics should be. I love it. But enough about what we think about it. Why don't we let Sean Kelley McKeever bring us into it?
Well, now let's meet one of our amazing spider friends, the kind of guy who goes to other friends who recommend. Find out about the things they created. You'll love them so much that you wish you dated. But you're just friends. They're an amazing friend. A friend. They're an amazing friend.
All right. Well, I am here with Sean Kelley McKeever, the writer of such Spider-Man titles as Mary Jane and the Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane series from the late aughts or mid to late aughts. We're very excited to have Sean here. And, Sean, just before we kind of get into the specific Spidey stuff, I'd love to hear, we always ask our guests on here just to kind of give us their origin stories a little bit in terms of their early history with comics. I mean, what were some of the first comic books that you were reading, superhero books, Spider-Man books, whatever they may be, and how did that kind of lead to you wanting to pursue a career in this medium?
Oh man. Well, with me, my origin with comics is my origin with Spider-Man. They're one and the same. I grew up in the 70s, and from an early age, 2 or 3 years old, I had an interest in some Spider-Man comics at the pharmacy, and so my folks started picking those up for me, and it was Amazing Spider-Mans and Spidey Super Stories issues, back in '75. And what's that?
As I say, did you get to experience the Thanos copter in real time, or?
Oh yeah, for real, yeah, yeah. I owned that. Yeah, I had a lot of those. In fact, I just picked up Spidey Super Stories 18, which was the bicentennial issue with Captain America in it. And it was fun to flip through those old, like the Spidey Super Stories writing style is just so hilarious. And yeah, like things like the Thanos copter and like the Doctor Doom Moondragon Star Wars spoof that they did with Quasar in it. I think at the time he was Marvel Boy though.
Right.
I love that stuff. But the Amazing Spider-Man title, I started with issue 149, which was the end of the first Clone Saga, and those issues were hard for me to, well, my parents were reading all of it to me. I mean, I was 3, but I got to the point where I wanted to know what the words were, and so I would ask them what stuff was, and I learned to read from an early age, reading those Spider-Man comics, and I didn't really venture too far outside of Spider-Man. I mean, I'd get Marvel team-ups, but I wouldn't go pick up like X-Men because they, appeared in a cameo with that issue with the Hulk or something like that. I pretty much just stuck with Spider-Man. I'd get the occasional, Archie's or Gold Key comics at the time, a couple DC here and there, but I wasn't, I liked Superman and Batman conceptually, but I just never got into the comics the way I did with Spider-Man. I mean, there was just something about Peter Parker. I really grew a deep connection with him, and it stayed with me, pretty much all of my life. I've actually got some great pictures from 1977 at the Wisconsin State Fair of me dressed up in my Spider-Man Halloween costume for the whole day to go meet Spider-Man at the State Fair. And there were 2 other appearances that year, like Spider-Man appearances, some guy dressed up as Spidey in that official costume at a couple malls. And I have pictures of those too. I went stalking Spider-Man in Milwaukee in 1977.
Did you watch the Electric Company Spider-Man stuff and all that too from that? Because I was around that time too, right? Yeah.
I was always at the same time, super excited for the Spidey section, and always super disappointed because he spoke in word balloons.
Right.
I mean, I get the educational purpose of it, but I'm I wanted Spidey to talk. But that was less disappointing than the Spider-Man, primetime TV show. So. Oh,
the live action one with.
The Nicholas Hammond. Yeah. Yeah. My buddy Mike Norton, who we worked together on Marvel Adventures Spider-Man. He's a big Spider-Man fan too. He recently rewatched that whole series. And I have no idea why. That just couldn't have been an enjoyable experience.
That's okay. I voluntarily reread the entire Clone Saga for a project on our blog. So sometimes we just do things. Sometimes we just do things to punish ourselves. Not that I'm actually a pseudo Clone Saga apologist, but sometimes you still. But to read the whole thing, there are some parts in it that are pretty dreadful, even as an apologist. So
yeah, that was kind of a rough patch with me and Spidey reading the comics. To backtrack a little bit from that, when I was 14, I guess, 15, right around the time of Kraven's Last Hunt. I decided to ask my parents, who owned a hardware and sporting goods store, if I could take this beaten up, well, not really beaten up, but this 4-foot magazine rack that the grocery store next door was getting rid of because they'd gotten new displays. And I asked them if I could take that and sell comic books in the hardware store. And they said yes. And so I started selling comics at retail in a hardware store. And I did that until I was, in my mid-20s. And so they went from that 4-foot magazine rack into like 250 square feet of space. So actually a decent sized comic book store for a town of 1,200 people that I was living in. And so when the Clone Saga started, it was exciting. And then when they decided to tell people, that Ben Reilly is the real Peter Parker, and that every story I read from my very first issue of Amazing Spider-Man was not the real Peter Parker, I blew a gasket a little bit.
Yeah, understandably.
And a lot of my customers did too. And the sales on Spider-Man books were kind of down, and then around that time, that was the same time that there was some distribution nonsense going on, where Marvel bought their own distribution company and decided to distribute exclusively, and it caused this whole shakeup that meant that a store of my size couldn't really carry Marvel anymore. I couldn't meet their minimums, so I had to just stop selling them altogether at one point.
Wow.
Yeah, it was kind of a bitter time for me in Marvel at that point.
Mid-90s was just wacky time. I mean, I used to get my comics from a baseball card store, and I think they didn't have issues with the distribution, but I just remember, like, I think even they were just starting to become, because that was when the bubble was bursting, and around that era they were just like, I don't know if we're still going to be carrying all these books. It was just like, this is not really prudent for us. And I mean, of course, like baseball cards too, where like, there was a whole speculator bubble with those as well, that I think that they were kind of biting them in the rear too. But I just, not to go on too much of a tangent, but that was, I knew card shop owners, and, that was a period where the sports cards were just busting. Yeah. And so and comic books were becoming hot, and they started carrying comics, but they sold them like they were cards, for the most part. I mean, it's a generalization. I also knew, sports dealers who were into comics, and so they knew kind of the specifics of how to sell a comic, hand sell a comic, that kind of thing. But there was a lot of people just ordering stuff in the hopes that it was going to be hot, and that helped cause the comics bubble. That and the non-sport cards at the time were really blowing up, and the whole thing just collapsed altogether. And there was one month in, I think it was April 1994, where something like 6,000 Diamond accounts closed up. That may not be the right statistic. I used to have a magazine with the charts on it, but it's a staggering number. It's thousands of accounts in 1 month just went belly up, and a lot of those were these. They were not primarily comic book retail establishments, but a lot of them were. And that was scary times for sure for the whole industry. And that's about the time I was trying to break in as a writer. Well. On that note, I mean, I mean, I could talk about the whole '90s and speculator stuff forever, but to talk about your career a little bit, I mean, one of your first like major projects was The Waiting Place, right? Which that was. And I kind of like branching off of that, and also into some of the Spider-Man content that you would later write. I mean, a lot of the work that you became known for was geared more towards younger audiences, and I'm just curious, what, like, how did that happen for you? But also, like, as you have worked on some of these projects, I mean, what has kind of been your mindset, your approach, your philosophy with these, younger, whether you want to call them like young adult books or just, but like these kind of offshoots of I don't even know if you would call the mainstream adult books, but you know what I mean? Like these YA books, like how did that happen for you, and how have you like kind of consistently approached those over the years?
Oh, sure. Well, the reason I started writing The Waiting Place was because since like late in high school, I've been trying to send blind pitches to Marvel to try to get hired there because I wanted to write Spider-Man so desperately, and always getting rejection letters, just the form letter. So I after a lot of time doing that and beating my head against the wall, I thought, well, what do I want to write about if not, somebody else's characters? And that's when I came up with the idea for The Waiting Place, which was really just kind of a means of therapy for me to, write about growing up in a small town. I came from Milwaukee, and when I was 8, my parents moved me up to this town of 1,200 people, and I don't think I ever really adjusted quite fully to that. And so here I was in my mid-20s and thinking, well, I'd like to write about that, and so I just started writing that and developing it. And I found artists to work with me through a friend on CompuServe, and I found together we wrote and drew the first issue, and we found Slave Labor Graphics to publish it, and that got me some notice in the business, not necessarily immediately, but eventually, particularly with the second volume when I started working with my buddy Mike Norton. And, this whole time I'm still trying to get Marvel to notice me and couldn't get them to notice me. But, it finally happened. Another friend of mine from CompuServe at the time, Paul Jenkins, was writing Peter Parker Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk for Marvel, and told his editors that I was interested in working there. And it just so happened that one of them was interested in having me work for them because he had read The Waiting Place and liked it. So the funny thing is, all these Spider-Man stories I had pitched over the years and whatnot, like I never went back to those when I actually got the chance to write Spider-Man, because writing The Waiting Place had informed me something, about myself and about what I want to write about, that I was able to bring into my superhero stories. And so, I was always kind of asked to write teenage characters because of The Waiting Place at first, and then because of Sentinel and Inhumans, and then because of Mary Jane. And I think, I just think that, that there's something that I do there that connects with people on some level. And I don't know if it's an authenticity or a certain affect or a combination of those things. I mean, I don't really go into it with a mindset that like, okay, I'm writing teenage characters and I'm writing them for this audience. What do I do? I write comics for me primarily. Yeah. So like all these like YA comics and stuff that I write, and and even stuff I'm doing now that I can't talk about yet, all features teenage characters. I'm just drawn to it. I think it's kind of an interesting sort of petri dish of humanity. I think that a lot of our emotions are heightened at that time. I think that anything's possible. I think that kids are underestimated and underestimate themselves and sometimes overestimate themselves to a degree that you don't really find in adulthood. And I think it's a nice microcosm from which to sort of explore that stuff, but I don't really like have a specific mindset. I just get into what the world is, and I inhabit it basically.
Right. I mean, maybe you can't answer this, but I'm curious. I mean, when you look at something that you're doing, whether it be Waiting Place or Mary Jane or whatever, versus like what Bendis and Bagley were doing in Ultimate Spider-Man. I mean, what do you think makes the industry classify your stuff as young adult or YA and their stuff really isn't? They just consider it, all ages or whatever. I mean, is it do you like in looking this or that? I mean, what are the distinctions from your eye?
I mean, I can't say that there's any. I mean, I would say that Ultimate Spider-Man is YA. Yeah. I mean, I guess if you're like asking kind of why is it like my stuff's been kind of ghettoized maybe a little in the direct market. I mean, I think that, you know, you hear a lot of lip service to wanting all ages books, but I don't think that I think that's a vocal minority, you know. I mean, there's just no other way to explain it. When you see across the board, you know, there are very few examples that are truly all ages books, and I would say that Ultimate Spider-Man was a little bit more PG-13, right? Than, like, say, the Marvel Adventures series or something like that. And even Sentinel, you know, was more like a PG-13, and Young Inhumans for sure. But I think, you know, I think there's some stuff that people glom onto and some that isn't as successful, and that's just how it shakes out, you know. I don't see any distinct difference outside of, you know, personal taste and preference.
You know, you mentioned your relationship with Paul Jenkins, or, you know, just a few minutes ago. So, I mean, how did that take you to now? You've done some. Was the Mary Jane series the first Marvel book that you did at that point, or had you done a few other Marvel books before that?
No, my first book was actually The Incredible Hulk.
Okay.
So Paul was writing that, and he was a bit behind, and asked if I could come in and we would co-write some stuff. And really, like, so I did one issue kind of as a tryout, and I had the idea for a plot and talked it over with Paul, and he gave me some pointers. And then, you know, after I wrote the script, he kind of came in as a second editorial voice. You know, we're listed as co-writers in it. And he definitely was a collaborator in it, but it was really, you know, it was really kind of my voice in there. But I was very grateful for everything Paul brought to it. And then after that, Paul was going to leave the series altogether, so he had his plot notes for the last few issues of the Hulk, and I took those plot notes and turned them into 3 issues of comics. You know, which is more of a real co-writing kind of situation, which I enjoyed a great deal. So that was my first stuff, and then I had, you know, little piecemeal jobs here and there. I wrote a fill-in for Spider-Girl. I wrote a fill-in for Weapon X that never saw the light of day. There's probably something else in there. I did a short story, a short Ant-Man story that Darwin Cook drew for Marvel Double Shot. And in 2002, Marvel came to me. They wanted me to be one of several writers to pitch on a couple ideas for new series, and they liked both of my pitches, and so that was Sentinel and Inhumans, and those came out in the spring of 2003, and that's when I became a full-time writer. And after that, there was Mystique and Marvel Adventures, Marvel Age Fantastic Four, and it was around that time that I was getting started on Mary Jane.
Now, did you pitch Mary Jane, or was that kind of brought to you?
It was initially brought to me. Mackenzie Cadenhead, who was an editor there, had gotten in touch with me. I guess the germ of the idea for the book was Alan Fine, who's one of the, you know, big muckety mucks at Marvel, wished that there was a Mary Jane comic book because of the movies, because there was a lot of interest in the character, you know, outside of the usual comic book readership. They came to me with the idea that they wanted a Mary Jane series that's kind of just about, like, the teen drama part of it, you know, like hanging around the coffee bean stuff. And then I turned, you know, I took that and made a pitch for it. And they liked what I had to do and had to say, and we went forward from there.
Now, I mean, considering that you were such a huge Spider-Man fan when you were younger, I mean, was there a moment where you were like, well, yeah, I mean, I'm glad to be in this universe, but, you know, I had something different in mind, or did you just kind of say, no, this is it. I'm in the universe. I can do this. Yeah.
No, you know, I was really excited to do it. I thought it was a neat opportunity to merge kind of what I did with the Waiting Place with the Spider-Man mythos. I think my first pitch was maybe a little Spider-Man heavier, and they pushed me away from that, which was actually really smart. But the thing that you mentioned actually happened when the same editor, Mackenzie, asked me to write Marvel Adventures Spider-Man. And I said, well, gee, I'm like, if I'm going to write this stuff, like I want it to be the real Spider-Man. I mean, maybe I could do it if I felt like this is like a nice warm-up for writing Amazing Spider-Man. And she goes, well, if you're going to look at it as a warm-up, then just don't take the job. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's actually a really good point. Like, you know, so I actually, you know, I brought a lot into that Marvel Adventures run of 8 issues. It was actually really hard to write those single-issue stories with different villain every issue, and had to have a complete story. And to me, I had to give it a little something extra every issue, you know, some kind of bit of heart. And that was hard to fit all that and to come up with a new story every month. But with Mary Jane, it wasn't like that at all. With Mary Jane, it was just like, wait, I have my own playground here. You know, yeah. I get to pick whatever villains I want to make cameos. So you better believe we're going to see Rocket Racer and Big Wheel and, you know, all these cheesy characters from, you know, my childhood. And even the not so cheesy ones, you know, like I always kind of liked Light Master's costume, you know, and he never made much of an appearance, I don't think, outside of like the early 80s in Spectacular Spider-Man. I remember him being here and there and not seeing much beyond that. So I used him for sure, you know. I'm like, yeah, these villains got to be seen again.
I'm just like, I'm thinking of that was it? I think it was a Bill Mantlo story with Lightmaster, right? With the brother sister. Anyway, sorry. No.
Yeah, I'm blanking on who wrote that. I can just picture the one cover right now.
Yeah,
I think there may have also been a Lightmaster and Will-O-the-Wisp story.
Oh man, now you're really going.
I don't think I put Will-O-the-Wisp in Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane, and I'm a little disappointed in myself. I didn't put Hypno Hustler in there either. I should have put Hypno Hustler.
So besides besides these great villains, I mean, besides the fact that, I mean, obviously the series, you know, it takes the perspective as, you know, from Mary Jane's point of view, but I mean, you know, we've kind of dealt with this before with certainly with Ultimate and other series where, you know, we're looking at the Spider-Man universe, you know, back to basics, back in high school. I mean, for you, what did that mean to you to be writing these characters at that point in their lives? I mean, what were you trying to accomplish? What were you trying to kind of show about these characters? I mean, what were some of your goals in doing that? Oh man.
Man, that makes me think back. I mean, I'm really kind of drawing a blank, honestly. I don't know that I was that. You know, I don't know. I really just I wanted to entertain people. I wanted to kind of show the relationships in a new light. You know, because I mean, really, if I'm being honest, the Mary Jane of my series is not really Mary Jane. I think that there's an idea of her that started in the first issue as like, this is Mary Jane, this is why she is the way she is and stuff. But I think it took kind of that broad idea of that she is she's exuberant on the outside because she's hurting on the inside kind of thing. You know, and kind of why she's drawn to acting. Outside of that, like, she was really kind of a different character. And, you know, I thought, here's an opportunity to do a modern take on her, a modern take on Peter, who's, you know, an awkward, nerdy kid, but to do it in a way that isn't so over the top. Liz Allen was, you know, just a complete rewrite. I just needed a character who was, you know, 100% id, who would just, you know, scream bits of plot at Mary Jane.
Yeah.
And kind of create some drama, you know, and do things like, you know, the kind of idea of Flash Thompson being a bully to Peter, and like in modern times, like without getting, obviously being all ages, without getting too serious with it, like how does that play out? And I was just interested in doing these little remixes. I mean, I don't think I thought too heavily about like this is the statement I want to make about Spider-Man and his world. I just wanted to make something that felt like authentically heartfelt, and fun, and hopefully moving, and that kept people coming, issue after issue.
Well, and I mean, you've used this word a couple times, and I mean, I have it, in my list of questions here all over the place. This, authenticity, and so I was thinking it, so it's not because you say it's you're not complimenting yourself per se, but I'm curious, like where do you think that comes from with you? I mean, like I read through this series, and like I'm like these, granted I'm removed from my high school years by some time now, but it felt like reading it kind of took me back to those times. And yeah, I mean, obviously there are elements of fantasy to it, but at the end of the day, it all feels very real and authentic. And I mean, I guess it's like, how does the magician do it? How do you do it? But seriously, like I mean, do you just spend a lot of times at your local coffee bean in Wisconsin to get to hear what the kids are saying, or what? I mean, how did that work for you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely don't. I mean, I couldn't tell you the first thing about what teenagers are like today or 10 years ago even. What I did was try I just tried to make it feel right. I mean, I'm still connected pretty heavily to those feelings I had when I was a kid. I was a pretty emotional kid. I was an awkward kid. I was in some ways a popular kid. I was, a little bit of a jock. I played hockey, but I was, kind of none of my teammates liked me. So I mean, I think a lot of that I'm still kind of connected to in a deep way. I mean, the thing I don't try to do is go, well, what are all the kids saying now? Like, what's the hot phrase to use? I mean, I think that's the quickest way to date your work. And, in 5 years, people are going to go, what the hell is this? Whereas, I would rather just go for emotional authenticity. I think the characters need to come from a real place. They need to feel real. And, I actually went to college for theater. I did a lot of acting in high school. And I think what really drew me to that is the same thing that draws me to writing characters, and that's that I have a way that I like to try to inhabit those characters and make them real, and I hope that comes through in the finished work. I mean, that's basically the job as far as I'm concerned. I'm not a hugely plot focused guy. I'm more of an emotion focused guy and more of a character arc focused guy when it comes to writing, and that's what I try to bring, and not necessarily the details of the modern teenage experience, which in some ways that probably backfires on me, because there are things I don't understand about it. But that's also why I kind of try to keep it broad in some ways.
I mean, you even had like a lot of, I don't know if you would even, if there were even love triangles. I think there were probably like quadrangles or, I mean, but like I always, like in reading them, I was, with obviously the power of hindsight. I mean, I'm like, they can never kind of devolved into, like overly soppy melodrama or anything like that. It still felt very kind of like, this is what teenagers go through. And I'm just kind of curious, when you knew that you were kind of going over that terrain in these stories. I mean, that's obviously something that could kind of devolve very quickly and become a bit of a mess for a writer. So, tame those, the love elements from getting out of hand and ridiculous.
Man, yeah, that's another thing that I don't quite don't quite recall details, but I'm sure that some of it was my editor Mackenzie, and then later my second editor Nate. I think that it's always important to have an editorial presence. Like even in I'm doing a creator-owned book right now, where we don't even have a publisher yet. We just want to make this book, and I made sure to get a consulting editor for it, because I need somebody to tell me, if I'm going too far, or if I'm, out of my mind, or if this makes logical sense, that kind of thing. And I think that Mackenzie and Nate were part of that. But I also think, I just never really want to delve too far into melodrama. I slip into it sometimes in my work. It with that earnest sort of melodrama, it gets a little too, saccharine sweet, gross. I know people love some of that stuff, like the TV show Parenthood and that. That level of earnestness, I just can't work with that. And when I do it in my work, it really bugs me, and I know I have done it. So I just try to be conscious of not letting things, because I think once you get to a certain point, it can drag everything down. It's that balancing act, the same as any other kind of plot element. You have to be careful of where you're going to take that, so that you don't write yourself into a corner. And with the Spidey and Peter and MJ plan, it was always kind of, I knew where the ending was, for that, and so I think that made it a little easier for me to navigate.
Now, you kind of alluded to this earlier in terms of dealing with this in the first arc that you worked on, but kind of going forward, how did you kind of fight the temptation, if you will, to not transform this book or these books into Spider-Man books? How did you kind of address the challenge of keeping him, if not a secondary character, maybe even a tertiary character in a lot of respects?
That was definitely Mackenzie at first. She pushed me away. I think my first version of the pitch had in the second arc, it really started delving into the Osborns and Green Goblin stuff, and became a little more intertwined with Spider-Man's world. And she pushed me away from that, and ever since then I was kind of cognizant of that. I think the most we ever got into that was the Looter arc, where the Looter was I don't want to spoil it for anybody who might still check out the series on Comixology, but the Looter was character in Mary Jane's life, and so that was the closest we ever came to making it more about the superhero stuff. And I guess too, when Spider-Man starts dating Firestar towards the end, that does that as well. But really, it's not very superhero-y, the stuff that they do. It's like hanging around and stealing kisses kind of stuff. But that was a lot of fun. I think at that point, I think I needed that element to keep me interested in the book. Because I think I just felt like beyond, by the time I got to issue 15, I was just kind of, there was a little bit of that, 11 through 13 that kind of dragged for me. And I think I needed something to change it up to get me excited about it again.
Did you ever just sit there and say, "Oh man, I just have this great Jonah story and I can't do it here"?
No. Yeah. I guess I don't know if his face is ever shown in there, but we mention him. But right. No, I just I really did want to just stay with that stuff and any of the other characters like Jameson or whoever. If I ever got the chance to write one of the Marvel Universe Spider-Man books, I would do that. I can't even remember. Yeah, we got to do some fun stuff with Jameson actually in Marvel Adventures Spider-Man. My last issue, number 12, Spider-Man fights Nightmare, in his dreams, and Jameson is a superhero in it, and he has like this big bling J and a cape, but he's still wearing his tie and suspenders, and like looking like Larry King, and he punches out Spider-Man, and that was fun, but I've never had a huge hankering to write Jameson. I love that character, but I think he's one of those people, like, I want other people to write him so I can enjoy it more.
Yeah. There's pressure, right? It's like, can you do a good Jameson story? Definitely.
Oh, especially since J.K. Simmons played him. I mean, on the one hand, like, it makes it easier to hear him in your head. Yes. But on the other hand, it's like, you can't top what he did with that character. He was just pitch perfect. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if they've. When I've looked at the IMDb page, if they have a Jameson in Homecoming, I hope they. I mean, it's like, I felt that the lack of the character in the two Mark Webb movies was, kind of a sad thing. So I mean, it'd be great. I think that they had a tone problem in general, and I think that Jameson could have been good for that. Yeah. But again, J.K. Simmons just kind of looms over everything now. He really does. Well, now he gets to be Commissioner Gordon. So, if that's happening, I don't even know what's going on with those Batman movies now. But I didn't hear that rumor. Oh, wow. Oh yeah, I thought that was kind of confirmed that they had cast him as Gordon, but now I know, like, Affleck's off as director. I don't know. It's a that's a whole other show. It's a drama, yeah. So, I mean, you kind of you were talking about kind of hitting lulls here and there. I mean, were you kind of surprised that this universe kind of lasted? Because it was the two minis before the ongoing. Right. And then, and so I mean, were you? I mean, when you did this, I mean, of course, everyone always wants their book to do well and to last and to be a legacy book. But I'm just curious. I mean, were you, after you did the first two minis and then it became an ongoing, was that kind of a surprise to you, or I mean, were you like, no, we got a good thing here. We can keep pushing this. No, I was. It was a big surprise, actually, because that first miniseries wasn't supposed to be a miniseries. That first series was supposed to be it, Okay. The ongoing, and it was cut down to 5 issues, and then it was cut down to 4 issues. So then when they asked me to do a second 4-issue miniseries, I was very happy to do that, and that was almost immediately after they told me it was only 4 issues. And what they found was that the digests were doing gangbusters, and so then they decided to do an ongoing. But the thing with the ongoing was they didn't want it to be called Mary Jane. They wanted it to start with Spider-Man's name because alphabetically it puts it with the other Spider-Man books. And if you're reading titles of things, and Spider-Man's the first thing you see, it's going to draw your eye to the rest of it, right? So they were brainstorming like all these ideas, like Spider-Man and Mary Jane, Spider-Man's girlfriend Mary Jane, Spider-Man presents Mary Jane, and I jokingly said, well, how about Spider-Man loves Mary Jane? And Mackenzie said, that's perfect. And so that's what the title became, and then we were an ongoing. And by then, I was super surprised that we still kept going, because we never sold well in the direct market. But apparently those book sales, were doing pretty well. And they were also selling to, I know they were selling like to Target stores, like a special edition of it. And I think they sold special editions to like libraries and to Scholastic and stuff. So they had a lot of outlets to make money with that series. But they just weren't the direct market where it was selling, like, according to estimates, like something like 6,000 copies or whatever, which isn't enough to sell a Marvel title, obviously. But, when I got to the end of it, I felt like I'd gotten to say a lot. I didn't get to say everything, but I was kind of, I don't know, I was kind of in a weird place, I guess. But I was just feeling kind of burnt out on the book. And Takeshi left the book with issue 15, and that we had David Hahn come in, and David Hahn's fantastic, and I loved working with him. But Takeshi leaving, I mean, Takeshi, Christina, and I as a team, that's still my favorite collaboration of all time in my career. And so it took a little wind out of my sails, I think. And then, like I said, I was kind of burning out on it before that anyway, and kind of not confident in what I was doing for a couple issues there, running out of kind of ideas. And so I thought, well, I'll make this last arc of 5 it for me, and then they can do what they want with it. Hopefully they'll keep it going with David and some other writer, and that was it for me.
In terms of your collaboration with Takeshi Miyazawa, is it Miyazawa? Miyazawa.
Yep.
I'm always kind of curious, especially when talking with creators from like the last decade or so, because you talk to these guys from like the 70s and 80s, and they definitely work a very kind of true quote unquote Marvel style. Did you work that way, or did you kind of do full script and then you got some pages back from Takeshi? How did that work in terms?
Yeah, that was it was full script. And when I'd get the artwork back is when I would do another pass on dialogue. And then after the lettering came in, do another, tiny pass on dialogue. Is basically how we worked. But I just think that, like when I write a script, it's a communication to the writer or to the artist, and I try to keep that in mind and not have it be too either too vague or too much like stereo instructions.
Right.
I try to make it like a conversation, and hopefully that's what Takeshi glommed onto. But there was just we were just so much on the same page. There were often times where I'd get a page back, and like especially the last panel of the page, I would look at it and I would say, okay, that doesn't need any of the dialogue I have in that panel, and I'd just get rid of it, and it was better for it because Takeshi got what I was trying to say. And to have the character say it would have been, it just would have been redundant, and it would have been clumsy. And so I loved working with him for that. And then Christina just brought such an amazing energy to everything she did, and all these details on the clothing. And it just always was just such a joy to get pages in.
Now just to kind of fast forward a bit, there were some interviews, I think, last summer with the director of Spider-Man Homecoming, John Watts, where the interviewer was asking him some of his resources for the movie, and he mentioned he said, well, Ultimate Spider-Man is kind of like the obvious one, but one that you may not be aware of or whatever was Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane, and I'm just curious, I don't know if you saw those interviews or not, but what does that mean to you that your work is being roped into what's probably going to be a many major blockbuster film, and like Marvel's big like Return to Spider-Man on the big screen?
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited for that movie. I thought Tom Holland was just fantastic in Civil War. That was the most of the Peter Parker I would want to see on screen like I had ever seen, and Spider-Man. And the costume I thought was fantastic. I loved everything about that. So I saw one interview with Watts where he said something about like it being like the Archie comics, and he thought it was funny and stuff. And the fact that he name checked it at all, like I was probably like beet red, like grinning.
Yeah,
really hard and blushing, like it was really cool. Now, I don't know how much he's really looking at that or looked at that, when it comes to, whoever, I don't even know who's actually writing it or has written the movie, but I don't know how much of a real influence it is. But I'm honored that he brought it up at all. I thought that was really cool, and I I made a little bit of hay out of it on Twitter. Just kind of, everybody probably got sick of me crowing about it.
Well, then of course they do the Breakfast Club poster, which of course, I mean, yeah, it's the Breakfast Club poster, but you had that. Well, I forget which issue number it was, but one of the covers of your comics had that like that homage as well. So I mean, it just kind of was like, I think like I'd read that interview and then saw that poster. I was like, oh my goodness, this like
what was
it's
that?
happening.
That was an Entertainment Weekly cover, wasn't it? Or Inside Entertainment Weekly? Yeah,
I think so. But I was like, it's happening. It's
yeah. I can't allow myself to like think that anything actually really is coming of that comment and that coincidence. I mean, I'm just skeptical that they're really going to mine that series for the movie. But if they do, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to steel myself for the possibility if they do, because that would just be the coolest damn thing in the world, and I won't be able to watch the rest of the movie because I'll be just freaking out.
Right. Well, I mean, like, a big thing about the marketing of the movie, I mean, they kind of, Watson's even said like, oh, it's going to be like a John Hughes movie with superheroes. And, like, so like when you hear that and obviously knowing what, how your book came across, I mean, like, what I guess, what would you be looking for as someone who obviously can appreciate and capture those voices of like teenagers within the Spider-Man universe? I mean, what do you think needs to be put forward on the big screen to kind of capture that in a way that would work for the movie, but also just kind of capture that authenticity that we kind of keep talking about?
Right. Well, I mean, just from the little bits that I've seen, and it's only those couple little bits, right, of the high school interaction in the trailer. I mean, I think they're doing it. I think it feels right. To me, it feels, like Peter's like, he's not a loner, but he's he's one of a duo of loners, like, yeah. I like that. I think that's more realistic than the usual sort of, a loner thing. It's usually you're either the most popular or the least popular person. And I always thought that was kind of silly. I like that sort of middle ground. I think, that kind of modern day John Hughes vibe, or like Edge of 17, I would say is like the modern day John Hughes kind of thing. I feel that in that little bit of trailer, and I hope they do a fair amount of that. I hope it's not just dressing for two big set pieces. I hope that it's got a through line that's emotional, and that everything that happens in the one world affects the other, and that they're not two separate characters, and that it's not just about, it's not just about the things that a lot of tentpole movies are about, which is spectacle, and spectacle's great, but let it matter.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I mean, when I heard, oh, we want this movie to be back in high school and stuff, it's like, it always kind of like, not that it gives me pause, but like you hear that a lot with Spider-Man. It's like, oh, it's best when it's like the Ditko Lee days, and then you kind of look back at Ditko Lee and like the character is, yes, he's a teenager, but there, because of Ditko being Ditko, there was some very kind of, very creepy outside outcast type things to it. So like to see what we saw in those trailers, it again, not to get you overly excited, but it felt like, it rang truer to, certainly to Ultimate, but Bendis' Ultimate, but also to what I saw in your series as well. I mean,
you actually bring up an interesting thing there, actually, which is, there was that big talk, like ever since Ultimate Spider-Man was announced, there was that talk of like, Spider-Man in high school is what's best, and and Spider-Man 2 and 3 suffered because he quickly graduated high school, and I think. I mean, wasn't in high school for that long in the comics, and none of my favorite Spider-Man comic books are from him in high school, except for, there are issues of Ultimate Spider-Man for sure. But I mean, like, in terms of the regular course of Amazing Spider-Man, it was College Spider-Man for me that was my favorite. But at the same time, I get those arguments, and I think that they're true. I found that when I was writing Marvel Adventure Spider-Man, and when I was writing Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane, that there's something about that teenager superhero that is a lot more fun. There's just something exciting about it, and I think it's what I mentioned before. It's sort of that petri dish of humanity. Anything can happen. It's new. It's all new to him, and I think that that's something that Bendis played with really well in Ultimate Spider-Man. But I think that the fact that they're doing that in a movie is really nice. But the reality of a movie or a TV show is that actors age, and some and eventually don't look like a teenager anymore. So there's only so much of that kind of stuff you can do before you have to move on. But I hope that they do a lot of that. I would love to see. What I'd really love to see, is a Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane animated TV series.
Yeah,
that's what I'd love to see.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that they didn't go in that direction. Around like kind of following up in the late 2000s and I think they went Spectacular. Spectacular
was close.
Yeah, Spectacular was close, but then they kind of got away from that again. But I guess they got a new series coming out, so who knows? So one of the things we always like to ask, kind of as almost final question to the creators we have on is and you've certainly alluded to this to some degree, but kind of more directly, what has it meant to you personally to have worked on Spider-Man?
I still kind of pinch myself over it, between Mary Jane and Marvel Adventures and Spider-Man Family, and other various little, wherever I could sneak him in, like my Gravity miniseries with Mike Norton. I've gotten to write, dozens of Spider-Man comics. So, there was that Megamorphs miniseries where it was based on a toy line where Spider-Man and the Hulk and Ghost Rider and these other characters pilot giant transformers of themselves. It's a character that gave me so much joy growing up, and like is indivisible with my childhood. I just hope that I was able to give that kind of joy to somebody else with my work. I know that I gave myself a ton of joy by getting to write it at all, even when it was very difficult for me to write it. There was something about the fact that I was writing Spider-Man that was always just sheer pleasure, just sheer joy. Like it could be, the biggest problem in the world. And I just thought, yeah, but you're writing Spider-Man. So, it still means a lot to me. I hope I'm not done with the character, but, time will tell.
Yeah. So, where else can we find some of your work? I mean, what are you working on that you can talk about? What's, this is your chance to just kind of plug away here.
Man, I wish I had stuff to plug. I left comics to work in video games for a few years, and so right now I'm just getting back into comics, but everything I'm doing is still kind of hush-hush. And the video game stuff I'm doing right now is also kind of hush-hush. But there will be a couple announcements this year, comic book announcements. One of them has been basically hinted at on Twitter by me and the the guy I keep mentioning in this podcast, Mike Norton. We're doing a new series together, creator-owned, that'll be out hopefully by the end of the year.
Awesome. And where can we find you on Twitter?
You can find me at Sean K. McKeever, and you can also find me at SeanMcKeever.com.
Awesome. Well, Sean, thank you so much for coming on and talking about the series. I'm sorry that I was making you think back to very small, minor details.
I'm just old.
No, the best is when we torment Tom DeFalco or Jerry Conway about something from 1979 or something. Are you kidding me? Yeah. What are you doing to us?
What were you thinking that month? I was thinking I got to pay my damn bills.
What were you having for breakfast when you created Peter's clone?
Well, I thank you for having me on. I always love talking Spider-Man.
And it's great. And obviously your passion for the character comes through. And yeah, I mean, I urge people to check out, all your work on, on Comixology or Marvel Unlimited or Trade or whatever, however they get their hands on it. I mean, I'll admit I kind of came to it a little late in the game, but I mean, I blew through a lot of those books. I just kind of binged them like it was Breaking Bad on Netflix, and I loved it. And it kind of brought a new appreciation for those wrinkles of the character for me as well. So again,
it's great to hear. Thanks.
Yeah. So I mean, just thank you so much for doing this.
Sure thing.
Mark, it was sad for me to have to sit out that interview, but I'm really glad that I got to hear it and learn more about this new book that we love and his process. I mean, so thanks again for Sean Kelley McKeever for coming on.
Yeah, and people who are locked into our Patreon page, the Friendly Neighborhood Spider Talk Members Club, there's a little extra conversation between Sean and I that kind of went on after the initial interview concluded, which Dan, through the magic of technology, managed to capture. So why don't you go check that out for a little bit more about some other books that he worked on. Now, it's not a huge Easter egg here, but a little more, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a whole other conversation about Marvel Adventure Spider-Man and all the other Spider-Man titles that he's worked on. And every time he's tried to hide Spider-Man and other works that he's done. So if you are fans of Sean Kelley McKeever's work, there's another bit of juiciness on there for you to discover. So that's over on our Patreon page. Go and check it out. Well, Mark, this is an awesome interview and a great opportunity to talk to a creator. Let's take this whole thing home, and I'll start it off by saying that you can find all of our new Amazing Spider Talk and old Superior Spider Talk podcasts over at superiorspidertalk.com. That's all 152 episodes. Mark, what is issue 152 of Amazing Spider-Man? Can you pull that one out of your brain?
Oh, is that a shocker Len Wein story? I think it is.
All right, I'm gonna let you have that because I think you're more certain than I am.
Oh no! I need to look this. Dan, this is total dead air here. I need to look this up right now. Hold on. Yes, I am right. I am totally right. It is a shocker Len Wein story with Ross Andrew on pencils. That's amazing.
Mark, you blew me away. That's really good. Oh,
I totally put that in my butt. You got to remember when we started the show, Dan, I wasn't that guy, and now I'm that guy.
Well, of course, you can find all of those episodes chronicling Mark's journey to become that guy on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube by searching for Amazing Spider Talk. And when you get there, please be sure to leave us a review on the show. We use those reviews to kind of help spread the word about the show, and we love reading them on the air. And you can also email the show at amazingspidertalk@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 9RED-GOBLIN. That's 9RED-GOBLIN to solve all of your, I guess, goblin-related issues.
Absolutely. And, of course, you should be sure to check out both of our Facebook pages and to check out our brother podcast, The Ultimate Spin, where we talk about Miles Morales and Spider-Gwen. Dan, where can we find you on the webs?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at @SupSpiderTalk, where I talk Spider-Man and, well, that's just about it. Spider-Man stuff. And a lot of self-congratulatory things, too, which, you know, it's Twitter. That's what you got to do. Mark, where can we find you on the interwebs?
Well, you can find me at Chasing ASM blog on Twitter. And, of course, you can find me on Superior Spider Talk, where I'm reviewing new issues of Spider-Man, where I'm doing the Eddie Brock retrospective series there in Brock again. And, Dan, you might have noticed this past week that I finally had a post up for the first time in about 2 years on Chasing Amazing blog again. It's an old Mark looks back and then starts talking about random things when he thinks of a comic post, kind of what Chasing Amazing was in the very, very beginning. And I can just say that those will be kind of the only posts I will be doing going forward on that site. And, maybe every couple of weeks we'll have a new one. But it's just another place to find me. And of course,
actually, I missed that. How did I miss that?
John, I just called you my son's name. Dan, I had it all over Twitter and on Facebook. You're terrible. You're terrible.
It's been a crazy week for me. More on that later. But, I'm going to go read that right now.
Terrible Spider Buddy. Yeah, I talked about Amazing Spider-Man 201, which is a Spider-Man Punisher story.
Is that the one with the kind of like barber shop colored background?
Yes, correct.
Sweet. I'm becoming that guy, too.
There you go. And, of course, don't forget to check out my book. I've been tweeting about it, and I even set up a Facebook page. That book is 100 Things Spider-Man Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die. You can pre-order it now at all major online book retailers and, of course, through the publisher's website, triumphbooks.com. Dan, what kind of silly thing are you going to throw at me, or are we going to just go and say goodbye?
Mark, when you were a young teenage girl, your life was often preoccupied thinking about boys. Did your Uncle Ben ever give you any advice about specifically being a teenage girl?
Yeah, funny thing about that. So obviously, when I was a teenage girl, Boys, of course, was on there. And, there was this one boy in particular. He was kind of shy and awkward, but, whatever. I still kind of liked him. And, it just drove me crazy because he started dating this one girl who was actually like a made-up character from an animated show from the early 80s, and like she wore like yellow and red, and it was just really weird. I'm like, why can't you at least like do someone in like real mainstream Marvel continuity instead of like these like made-up animated shows? I mean, like it's almost like they couldn't use Human Torch for some reason, but they needed a fiery character, so they made a female fiery character like Human Torch. Let's just call her Firestar. But anyway, so I started venting to Uncle Ben about this, and he was like, you know what? Uncle Ben had this habit, Dan, of taking things a little too far, like, kind of behind my back. Like he really got his goat. So he like went over to this boy's house and, knocks on the door and wanted to kind of say, why are you ignoring my niece? Who's my niece right now? And, lo and behold, this fake character ended up being over at the boy's house, and just like was really put off by my Uncle Ben being so forward about it. So she started to use her microwave waves and just started to like really fry him up. And it turned out this fake character ended up being a supervillain. It was terrible. But as the microwave waves were cooking Uncle Ben's skull, he cried out, "Oh, why did I get involved in girl and boy stuff? And with great podcasts must also come amazing Spider Talk."
Don't miss the next installment.
How did you respond to this as a teenage girl?
Yeah, whatever. I just went on Twitter.